Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. It is the diabolical simian of mayhem himself, the gorilla, with my main man, Nick, as well as the Dark Raven of the Deep State himself, the one and only Velas. And I guess we're all three of us going to be hanging out. Lots going on in the world, gentlemen. Again, guys, check out our paid sponsor. Check out our spade sponsor.
It's the end of the week. We're okay.
Oh my God. Algofactory.tech, algofactory.tech. There's a free algorithmic giveaway. Nick, you want to talk about that free algorithm?
Oh yeah. So I put something new together, and the old Algo is great. Still works fine. But what I did yesterday was I put together a video that shows you how to turn that algorithm into code, how to take that code and plug it into TradingView so that it is an indicator, aka Algo, on the screen. It tells you when to enter and exit trades. We're going to have to learn how to optimize it and actually use it if you want to do that. It's not really for you to do that. It's there for you to learn how to build something. But I take you step by step through exactly how to make it using the data on the screen, put it into code, translate it to what's on the screen as far as an indicator. And then I give you the tools you would need to plug it into your exchange so it can trade for you. So it's pretty comprehensive, and it's actually pretty succinct. I think it's about a 17-minute video. Links in the description. Check it out. Let me know if you have any questions.
There you go. And with that being said, lots going on in the world. Things just keep swinging worse and in directions that I don't like. And it's getting to the point where I can confidently say that nobody's in control of the ship. Maybe.
Hey, I was just on the bridge and there's nobody there.
Guys, Velas, Nick, and I, we've kind of took a peek into the galley and into the command center. There's really nobody there.
There's just a piece of string tied to a control lever. It's connected to the chair.
I think I saw Larry, Moe, and Curly in the engine room. There's a movie, Apocalypse Now, I think it was, and they're getting pretty deep into the jungle, and it's just this weird scene where it's a night battle, and they go in to, these guys are on a boat on a mission, right? But they go into this basically a small skirmish, and there's a U.S. platoon and they're fighting. And it's a wild scene. Guys are dropping acid and all kinds of stuff.
The Dolan Bridge.
That's it. The Dolan Bridge. And they go in there and they're trying to find out what's going on. And they can't find anybody who knows what's going on. Nobody's in charge. And the guy comes in and he goes, "Hey, what's going on?" He goes, "What's going on here? Where's your CEO? Where's your commanding officer?" And the guy looks at him and he goes, "Aren't you the CEO?"
And then the roach comes out and he goes, "Soldier, do you know who's in charge here?" And the guy looks at him and goes, "Yeah," and walks away.
Yeah.
God, that is hilarious. The international economy has reached Dolan Bridge capacity.
That's it.
Oh man, we're living it now. I have a couple of sound bites to warm us up, if that would.
Yeah, let's do that before we get into the hard and heavy stuff.
Yeah, so I didn't have time, folks, for a whole show, but I've got a little bit of content I was going to share with you, and then the three of us will give it a go. So one item is the Diddy parties, if we all remember those, because he's getting sentenced today. And while the media continues to be titillated and push stories about wild parties at his house and others like him, there is a dark side to that story nobody's mentioned. And there are a lot of dark sides. There's a rumor, and it's no rumor, in Hollywood that many of the women at those parties or who attended those parties are now on huge doses of anti-HIV drugs, as are many who attended them. Yes. And so over time, we will see the outcome of that reality. Not to be indelicate, but, to put on my hat from a past life, if we tease out this scenario, this exercise, then what we will see most probably in months or years ahead, we'll start noticing certain high-profile people who have to be checked into the hospital for an undisclosed condition. We'll see where that takes us. We mentioned on a prior program about Professor Zhang, spelled Jiang on YouTube. Now, there is some folks out there that were chatting about him, and their comments are very well taken, to use the legal parlance, about, not to be indelicate, but words to the effect of, where the hell did this guy come from? He's like, there's nothing, and then he's there. Plus, I noticed in his profile, which may or may not be correct, that evidently he's teaching these classes in Italy, even though they're in English. So we'd mentioned him before, and he does offer some very good bite-sized explanations of some heavy topic matter. And his name is pronounced Zhang Shuiqin. One of the programs he did recently caught my attention, among many, about easy money. Credit needing to continue for the United States, and this goes directly to kind of how we opened today's discussion. Equally, why policymakers and senior business leaders will or must continue the FIRE economy, that being finance, insurance, and real estate sectors. His take on it was, it's because for the United States to return to manufacturing in the true sense, or building physical assets, would rely on a level of, and don't misunderstand the use of the term, it would rely on a level of hard work the country doesn't have the stomach to do. And of course, his position is based on his work, and it is worth consideration. My own two coins in the pond on this is I grew up in a General Motors and Chrysler town in the Midwest, among other manufacturing firms we had in the area. And there was a lot of anger in the early 1980s. We've talked about this on other programs about, especially with auto manufacturing, about the idea of automation and robots replacing key parts of the car assembly process. For unions, it meant they were losing jobs, and for workers, it meant they were losing jobs. And this was on the heels of the slaughter in the Rust Belt states, with steel mills closing. There's another case of those events not being exactly what people think they were. But what's the reality? Well, there's parts of the car assembly lines that were being replaced were the most dangerous part of the assembly plant. It's why there was backroom deals between the unions and the car companies to make automation palatable to everybody. Your takeaway being a lot of people were maimed or killed in those parts of the auto assembly line. So removing it wasn't exactly something anybody wanted to argue about, other than the loss of jobs. Now, that kind of work versus workers attaching doors or interiors, or even putting an engine into a car. There's a documentary out there called The Last Truck. It's about the closure of one of the GM plants that used to build trucks. And in that documentary, workers were interviewed and talked about how the real test for anybody working in those plants was, could a new hire last a week? If you made it a week, then you probably would make it.
Yeah.
A week working in that plant, 10 hours a day, on your feet, managing the pain and the soreness of working there. And it's another reason why we had the opioid crisis in this country, from parts of the United States where we've got retired auto or steel workers, among others, living with that kind of pain. Nearly everyone who worked in those industries has several debilitating injuries requiring pain management. So to Professor Zhang's point, any talk of the U.S. returning to that kind of labor simply isn't going to happen. No one in their right mind wants to return to those kinds of working conditions. And at the same time, that's why we have a lot of foreign labor working in our meat processing plants here in the United States. I don't know a lot of Americans who want to risk losing a finger or a hand working in a meat processing environment. It's an oversimplification, but there's a lot of truth to it. So instead, and this was Professor Zhang's point, many Americans, obviously not all, tend to choose to play the stock market and take advantage of low interest loans and try to survive on finance, insurance, and real estate, ergo the FIRE economy that we're living in. The problem with that, though, is we've run the course, and they're trying to, install another economic model, and we all haven't received the owner's manual yet on what that looks like. The other item I had for you concerned the H-1B visas in general, and a little bit of truth about what's really going on. There's a video out there that I'll post later about recent dust-ups regarding the H-1B visa holders. And we also have to remember there's many types of work visas that are out there. The class called H-1B is just one of many. And around the 4-minute 15 mark the narrator in the video points out to changes in U.S. tax law for corporations. The first was the tax rate was lowered to 21% overall aggregate. And then U.S. this is the important part, U.S. corporations with corporate divisions in other countries only pay 10.5% tax. So then, therefore, what's really occurring with the visa topic? Well, it doesn't matter if visas for workers to come to the U.S. and work here are at risk, or they require more money up front, like $100,000. Nor is this what we saw in the early 2000s, where you have a number of corporations saying, well, we'll just offshore the work, send it to another country. What's happening is we're sending workers in many respects back to their native countries to perform the same work they were doing here, but they're going to work for the U.S. affiliates that are operating in those countries. So from the world of you receive the behaviors for which you reward, keep that in mind. There's not a publicly traded company on this planet that doesn't reward executives for cutting costs. And I don't want to live in a world where we do not reward people for good work, nor do I think we need a socialized workforce. But at the same time, as somebody who remembers the collapse of the steel industry and consolidation in the auto industry and the IT collapse of 2001, massive labor shifts in the United States are never a good thing, period. So what's your final takeaway? All the blame and attention on AI eliminating jobs is misdirection. There's no one I know supporting AI tools, and I mean in academia, the commercial sector, or in government, who's not very busy. Why? Yeah. Because those tools need a lot of care and feeding to keep them operating properly. You don't just flip a switch and it's like, there, AI is doing it all for us. No, it has to be carefully, data and so on has to be scrubbed and cleaned, and the tools have to be taken care of. There's still a massive human element behind it. So every time the U.S. has a new technology or a new approach that's developed, what I'm noticing over the last 30 years is we use American labor to mature that. And then once it's a mature industry, we offshore the thing and lay off the American workers. I remember after I got laid off in the telecom industry and I was working in a completely different industry, say it with me, 4 to 5 years later, I had recruiters and people I used to work with saying, hey, everything's good now, come back. And it's like, hell no, I'm not going through that again. And so, as I've mentioned on other programs, it's also why I take with a bit of pain as I watch this move now of, geez, we're building all these data centers. We can't find enough people to work in the data centers. And it's like, yeah, but for any of us who've worked in data centers, we've been through at least 2 major cycles over 20 years of mass layoffs and dealing with people saying, well, you're a dinosaur who works in data centers anymore or whatever. And then we turn the corner again and it's like, oh, we need everybody back in the data centers. Yeah, because you've got a new technology. And you've got to mature it. And then once it's mature, you're going to let us all go again. Now, for certain entrepreneurially minded people or folks I know that know how to manage their lives, for them, it's like, that's not a problem. I'll just charge them a premium. And when I see the end coming, I'll migrate back into making buggy whips. But my point on this is everything we were seeing in the news and this great wailing throughout the land about the H-1B visas and the narrative being pushed on people who are conservative or liberal in their worldview is a complete play, because it had nothing to do with we're going to keep H-1Bs, we're not going to keep H-1Bs. No, this was mapped out quite some time ago. So instead of shipping all the jobs to Tata, Wipro, Cognizant, and all the other big Indian offshoring firms, they're just going to ship the jobs to the U.S. affiliates of those businesses, who no doubt are receiving support from those firms. But we're gonna play the narrative to both sides. Oh, people are harming immigrants to the United States, or the other side, we're finally doing something about the abuse in the H-1B visa system. No, you're not, and unfortunately, you never will be, because there's so much money tied up with that. There's no way it's gonna stop. But anyway, those were some of my sound bites for today.
Well, I am a buggy whip enthusiast, and I approve that message. Yeah, and it's something that people don't understand. That you said it all, Velas, but people don't get how hard factory work is. It's backbreaking work.
It is.
And I don't think that we're hungry enough in this country to be willing to do that. And I mean like literal hunger. I think people have to be kind of so starving that they're willing to risk a finger at a meat packing plant, as you put it, right? I mean, now we have a meat packing plant not too far from where I live. These jobs do exist, but who's working them? So yeah,
it's like I raised on another program about the situation in Los Angeles with ICE and similar. And quite frankly, in my opinion, it in part goes to, again, another narrative we're being fed about what's going on with Venezuela, which is not, the truth is not what you're seeing in the news, because nobody on any side wants to admit what the truth really is. But you've got, I said a couple of shows ago, you got ICE roaming around LA, and they're busting certain business owners. And there's a great wailing heard throughout the land because of the worldview of labor and the history of labor, which is very, very important to the conversation in California, not to beat up the state of California unfairly. Their dealings for more than 100 years when it comes to labor are radically different than the other parts of the United States. And we have to be honest with ourselves about that, regardless of the politics that are involved. But when all of that was happening, I made a comment on a show where I said, last I checked, if the government really wanted one big hanging fruit to go deal with when it comes to illegal labor, go hit the Tyson plants out in Arkansas. But that didn't happen. Go hit the pork processing facilities out in Nebraska and other states. That didn't happen. So was it really about labor? A little bit. But what was it really about in LA and certain other cities? Because those businesses were laundering money, huge amounts of money. And I'll take a page out of Gus Demos's book. Even people running illegal businesses are still wage slaves of a fashion for the rest of us who, quote unquote, think we live legitimately by filing our taxes and this, that, and the other. Even illegal businesses are still, to some degree, folks, paying taxes, because there's still to use the economics term, there's still a transaction cost when it comes to certain things they do where they're still paying taxes. They may not record all their income, and they may obviously on the monies they're laundering, but they're still, in a strange way, this is why they call it the gray economy in the Mediterranean. They're still contributing to the economy, just not as thoroughly as they should be. But again, to the situation of Venezuela, that if if the United States government wanted to shut down narcotics trafficking, other than the fact we're responsible for most of it, we could shut it down. So, Dr. Evil, pinky to lips, then what's this about? It's laundering.
Yeah.
You know, when you have a criminal state like Venezuela, who for ideological purposes and similar, has run its economy into the ground. And this is no different than certain countries in Africa. This is no different than certain offshore banking centers. The list goes on. If you're a country like Venezuela that has a lot of assets and precious metals and things, then you're going to flip the switch and start laundering money. You're going to start moving commodities without declaring them. You're going to let, my personal favorite, you're going to let ships reflag in your ports when nobody's looking.
Correct.
And, as the old saying goes, to some people I used to work with in Washington, we didn't go into Panama because we had to stop Noriega from trafficking drugs. Hell, the man was on our payroll. We went into Panama because we weren't getting the money we were supposed to be paid from the trafficking of drugs in Panama.
If you don't laugh at this stuff, you'll cry. Oh my god!
Oh man!
Oh my god!
I'm reading a book right.
Cut.
I'm reading a book right now, folks. Actually, I finished it. I'll use it on a future show by Sean Atwood. I've mentioned him before, and he's got a chapter in there where a major, well-known drug dealer who was busted later was explaining how he got into the business. And he said he and his high school friends used to sneak marijuana out of Mexico. And there's a story he tells where they get busted on one of their routes that they're trying to move drugs into the United States. And the Mexican cops are beating them up in prison because that's what they have to do. But while they're beating them up, they're apologizing and they're telling them, look, if you just pay us, We'll give you a free kilo for every kilo you buy, while they're clocking them in the jaw going, just don't do this again.
Jeez.
You have to appreciate their honesty. That's exactly what I was thinking while he's describing how they're getting beaten up.
Unbelievable.
And so they gave him a bunch of ice after they got done beating him up, and then they let him go. And as they're driving away, the Mexican federales are like, "Remember, a free kilo with every kilo you buy."
It's like a
And I'm
commercial.
thinking, God, this was such a simpler thing he should have been doing. Why smuggle it when you can just pay off local law enforcement?
It's like that commercial, and your third kilo is free.
Yes, a discount for the holidays.
Yeah. Ask for a Christmas special.
It's snow in the summer.
Oh my God.
Hey,
All these
as a friend of mine often say, it's always snowing in Miami.
Yeah.
Ain't that
There's a lot of you're absolutely right, man. There's a lot of laundering operations that are occurring in Venezuela, and also they're sitting on so much oil as well.
Yes.
Those are the two biggest reasons. It's not because you hit on the nail on the head. It's not because of the narcotics, which segues us into what I'm about to bring up here. Is it's from all intents and purposes, and there's a few commentators, my buddies over at Duran talked about it, and I'd also have to mention it as well. It looks like we're entering a 3-front war here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We have the situation in Venezuela, and we know that Venezuela has been used by the Russians for a base. The Iranians have parked warships there, so on and so forth. In fact, right now, as I'm talking to you, all of you guys, the Russians are moving some assets into Caracas and the northern areas, air defenses and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting. Now, the other front war, we know we are literally maybe weeks away from another major strike on Iran. And at that point, if you think it's going to go like the 12-day war that occurred, Iran they're literally stating that they're going to go, the gloves will be completely off. And they're going to go for the gusto and release what they have and on Israel, which brings us to the point where we're going to be involved, right? And finally, there's a wonderful article that was put out by Bohan Pasevsky, Alexander Ward, and Laura Singelman over at Wall Street Journal. And this is one of the things that I was afraid of, and I talked about I think last week, or was it Monday or last week, Cowboy? We talked about World War III.
I think it was last week.
Yeah,
Might have been Monday. Yeah.
Might have been Monday. Just the weeks. It's also, like I said, there are weeks where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. That's the time we're living in. The article from the Wall Street Journal. Let me just bring that up real quick. It's a very good article, and we want to look for the nuggets between all the other stuff here. U.S. to provide Ukraine with intelligence for missile strikes deep inside Russia. We all know there's probably 1.8 to 1.9 million dead Ukrainians. We know the Ukrainians, there's no Ukrainian military anymore. The Ukrainian army, navy, air force has been completely wiped out. There's nothing left. What you're seeing fighting is just old people, people with Down syndrome, and mercenaries. That's basically who's fighting for Ukraine right now.
I would also throw in they're functioning more like militia than organized armies.
Correct. So it's literally a losing prospect. But then we have Donald Trump. I'm out there telling you that the Ukraine is doing an amazing job, and maybe Russia's a paper tiger. Okay. So we all know, and the Russians know this, the Chinese know this, the Iranians know this, the entire world that has a thinking brain knows this. There's no way in hell Ukraine can be brought up to speed and trained to fire tomahawks. The telemetry, the targeting, and the trigger man is going to be the United States. Let that sink in. The telemetry, the targeting, and the trigger man is the United States, which at this point, in the eyes of Vladimir Putin, in the eyes of Sergei Lavrov, in the eyes of Dmitry Medvedev, in the eyes of Sergei Shoigu, in the eyes of all the Russian leadership, the United States is now officially actively involved in deep strikes into Russia. And then you have what's his name? Rosie Palm over at Rosie Palm and his 5 friends over at Andorra. What's his name? Lucky Palmer, right? I like to call him Rosie Palm and his 5 friends. Anyway, Rosie Palmer is he's unveiling his new Barracuda cruise missile. Oh yeah, as well, which is a short range cruise missile, maybe 500 miles range at that. Tomahawks, 1,500 miles, nuclear capable. This is a major escalation. And here's the worst part. They're going to be selling Tomahawks also to the EU, more arms and this, that, and the other. And guess how Ukraine is going to be playing for all of these armaments. Not only are we, giving them aid, but now a new chapter has been greenlit. I don't know if you guys heard this, but they're going to use those stolen, frozen $300 billion of Russian funds to pay for it. How do you like those apples, guys?
There's a couple of countries who said they were going to do that.
Yeah,
I think Belgium was one of them, or it is either they have capital assets, whether metals or monies, or yachts of Russian oligarchs to be sold. In a couple of cases, straight out of the pages of piracy, Russian cargo ships that were seized, who may or may not have been moving things they shouldn't have, but countries saying we're going to sell the boat and the cargo to fund the conflict. Right. I think my own 2 coins is I think in part this is just another laundering exercise, hiding behind the veneer of an arms deal. I think you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. I mean, this goes back to the Patriot missile systems in '91 when we gave them to Israel. U.S. personnel, I say personnel for a particular reason, because it may have been military or it may have been contractors. There's no other way to say it. But those systems are so complicated. I had a fraternity brother that was on board an Aegis cruiser and described to us how many years of time it took until somebody actually let him launch a cruise missile. Yeah, because of how complicated those systems are. There is no way you're not handing a pistol over to somebody. The systems are just too complicated. So it means U.S. personnel are going to have to man them. Yeah. So now you're a combatant, which we've already seen. How many times have we brought up just on Rogue? Prisoner exchanges are similar, or my personal favorite, the Spetsnaz forces who captured a couple of British intelligence people and weapons operators because the Russians moved faster than anybody thought they would, and so they caught the Brits behind enemy lines. Yep. But to Tom Luongo's point, this is I don't want to say human shields exactly, but this is an attempt by multiple parties to try and do anything they can to get the Russian government to react in a way that justifies them going full bore. But again, in my opinion, behind all of this is simply the excuse to find a way to continue to profit from the movement of monies that are used for these declared reasons. Oh, we're sending arms. Well, somebody's got to be paid somewhere. And by the way, that goes to the shippers, that goes to the countries, unless you're flying the stuff in. And even then, there's still people getting paid. Europe has got to find a way to get money coming into their countries. They can't pay their bills. I mean, it's ironic that what V and Nick, 10 years ago or so, there was the thing about, maybe a little longer than that, after 2007, 2008, 2009, and everybody's like, oh my God, the EU is going to fall apart because Greece and Italy are going to drag them down. And then, as we've mentioned on a couple of shows, and this is the God's honest truth, the gross, and I have many friends who are Greek, the gross domestic product of Greece, the European Union allows Greece, this is not a joke, they allow Greece to include drug shipments, illegal untaxed cigarettes, and prostitution to be included as part of their GDP figure so that they can stay inside the European Union. Well,
they've also done that to Switzerland as well.
I now am wondering how long until France and Belgium are in the same boat. So, as we've also said on a number of programs, it's certainly my view, as long as the war on paper continues, these governments can explain certain, let's say, financial irregularities. But the minute the conflict stops, I mean, really stops, and even if it's, and I don't want to see this, but even if it's a North-South Korea-like armistice, now they've got a problem because they don't have anything to hide behind anymore about, to use the ubiquitous line out of many a movie or a TV show, where's the money? Meanwhile, the United States and China are just sitting on piles of gold. But anyway, I yield the floor.
Absolutely right, man.
Give us the money, Lebowski.
It was a beautiful carpet, man.
Yeah, the carpet pisters did this.
Yeah, it just made the room.
Really
it really
tied the room
did.
Together. The best part of that is the big Lebowski goes through his whole speech, and he's sitting in his fancy office with the fire going, and the bums always lose, and he goes through this tirade, and then Lebowski walks out, and the assistant comes up. He goes, "Oh, so what did he say?" He goes, "Yeah, he said I could have any rug I want."
Shut up, Donnie.
What's that?
There's shut up, Donnie.
Yeah.
John Goodman.
Yeah.
There's actually a video out there on YouTube of somebody whose argument is Donnie actually doesn't exist, that he died in Vietnam, and what do you call it? John Goodman's character just thinks he's there, and Lebowski just goes along with it. I don't think that's the case, but it was kind of an amusing angle.
Yeah, that's a back to your comment about the anti-HIV or the HIV deal with the Diddy and all that. Now, I know Charlie Sheen, who must be really protected somehow. He gave some of those girls HIV, and they're all still walking around. It seems as if and somebody, I think it was Rob or someone in the comments, talked about AZT, and if you read RFK's book, it talks about HIV, AZT, a few theories around that. And my mom's convinced that my uncle, who also had HIV, died because of the AZT. He kept himself alive on HIV for 20 years using like Eastern medicine, and he wouldn't use any of the regular stuff. And then, as things progressed, he started taking the AZT, and that's when it went downhill.
That's the ultimate reply as well to those who sadly make their worldview always based on what their political or ideological affiliation they think says it's supposed to be, i.e., I have to attack anybody who attacks the CDC or the NIH or Dr. Fauci, because to attack those institutions or him means I support Donald Trump. And it's like nothing could be further from the truth. My rebuttal to many of those same folks is channeling my best imitation of the movie The Insider. Is Dr. Wygand telling the truth? Yes. Are we going to publish it? No. Why? Because the more truth he tells, the worse it gets. When it comes to this topic is on the AZT criticism. That is not the Wall Street Journal. That is not Forbes magazine. That is not, no harm, no foul, to us in the alternative community with a back page on 4chan. That was the Village Voice. Certainly not the paragon of conservative thought in America. The Village Voice went nuclear on Fauci because of what he did to the gay community and because of what he did to compromised people through blood transfusions or similar who acquired either HIV or AIDS, and the selling of a drug they knew did not work and did it again. And of course, anything past that point, and I become Mike Moore, and I'm just not prepared to go to that level of anger, although I totally understand why Mike Moore feels the way he does.
Oh, I mean, if you want to talk about anger, just read RFK's book. I got about 2/3 of the way through, and I had to stop because I was getting sick with everything that we're talking about. It goes so deep and it goes so far. I mean, these people,
I knew when I read that book I was going to have a problem because the text was so small. And and as I started reading it, I thought, RFK, for the love of God, just print the bigger book. I don't like reading books with a magnifying glass.
I've got one word for you: audible.
No, you lose something in translation.
You kind of do, but at least you read the book. I do like to read actual books, and I do. But I've got so much going on. I can't just sit and read a book. I have things I need to accomplish.
No, I've been there. That's usually business books for me, though, where you have what they call automotive university. And of course, on your comment about I read books, I'm getting a flashback to Bill Hicks, the comedian. What you reading for? Not what am I reading? Just why are you reading?
What you reading for? Oh boy, wrong meeting.
I'm in a wrong meeting. I was in a Waffle House in Memphis, Tennessee, and she wanted to know why I'm reading.
What you reading for?
I'll tell you this. Shifting back to this whole entire thing, the three-front war, right? The lies that are being told, the lies about, they're buying, the European Union and Ukraine are going to be buying from us, or NATO is going to be buying for us, is a total outright lie. The U.S. will provide Ukraine with intelligence for long-range missile strikes on Russia's energy infrastructure. That's good. That's a good thing, guys. Hit them at the energy infrastructure. We are dealing with people, okay, in the United States, leadership, that literally think this is 1991. Russia is still the broken, dilapidated Soviet Union. And China is nothing but a sweatshop with people living in rice paddies,
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're seeing here. President Trump recently signed off on allowing intelligence agencies and the Pentagon to aid Kiev with the strikes. Well, that's a good thing, too. Not only are we going to be targeting Russia's energy infrastructure, the same infrastructure that's in St. Petersburg and Moscow and Krasnodar and Sochi and all the other places that are in Russia, but we're also, our intelligentsia is going to be actively involved as well. Pentagon, and our intelligence agencies. U.S. officials are asking the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO,
also ours,
also ours, exactly, or allies to provide a similar support. And these people said, the expanded intelligence sharing with Kiev is the latest sign that the Trump is deepening his support for Ukraine as his efforts to advance peace talks have stalled. Because you're not going to fly Vladimir Putin in and have like a 2-hour meeting and say that you've won world peace. That's not how it works. It's really simple. What I've done is really simple. I took the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia and made them sit together and said, be nice. Give me my Nobel Peace Prize. It's ridiculous. It's not how it works. There's a lot of meetings that need to occur between the underlings and foreign ministers and department officials before the actual heads of state meet. That's how it's done. In the first time, officials say that the Trump administration will aid Ukraine strikes with long-range missiles against energy targets deep inside Russian territory. While the U.S. has long assisted Kiev's drone and missile attacks, the intelligence sharing means Ukraine will be better able to hit refineries, pipelines, power stations, and other infrastructure far from its borders, with the goal of depriving the Kremlin of revenue and oil to sustain its invasion. This is also the reason why Vela's mentioned the reflagging of certain petroleum-carrying boats in Venezuela. There's a link there. This also explains why Russians are moving assets to Venezuela. While the U.S. has long assisted, so the U.S. is also weighing deliveries of Tomahawks and Barracudas, as well as tilapias and the Chilean sea bass, and other American-made goods and air-launched missiles that have ranges around 500 miles to 1,500 miles, blah, blah, blah. The intelligence combined with the more powerful weapons could have far more potent effect on Ukraine's previous strikes in Russia, causing greater damage to its energy infrastructure. They literally, gents, want to test every red line. They want to go from poking the bear to taking an electrical prod to the bear, wondering if the 1,500-pound bear won't rip your freaking head off. U.S. officials are waiting written guidance from the White House before sharing necessary intelligence, one official said. A spokesman for the Defense Intelligence Agency said he couldn't comment on the ongoing or active intelligence operations. A spokeswoman for the Central Idiot Agency declined to comment. The administration recently approved the sale to Ukraine of extending range munitions, air-launched missiles that can travel between 150 to 280 miles, Tomahawks, one of the most precise U.S. weapons that have a range of 1,500. Ukrainian President Volodymyr the Clown Zelensky revealed last week that he asked Trump for Tomahawks, and Vice President Mr. Maybelline himself, Mr. Vidal Sassoon, J.D. Vance with the eyeshadow, said Sunday on Fox News that the U.S. was considering Ukraine's request. The approval, the additional intelligence came shortly before the Trump vented his frustration with President Vladimir Putin in a social media post. That's what he does, like a freaking 3-year-old child. Announcing that Ukraine could recover, all its seized territory in your dreams, Donald. In your dreams. U.S. officials said Trump had previously said Ukraine couldn't win the fight without being able to strike inside Russia. You ought to see. Fellas, let me ask you this. What is your best take on how the Russians are seeing this?
We have to keep in mind in any of these situations, and V says it often, we're reading other people's mail.
Yep.
We're not in the room, because I have shared on many a program various events where at least I've had, I wouldn't say firsthand, but I've had a much better view because I was sitting in a secret compartmentalized facility or similar and could hear more about what was going on. And I say this quite candidly when, in the movie Conspiracy Theorist with Mel Gibson. With Mel Gibson. There's an opening scene where Mel Gibson says to somebody in his taxi cab, well, the Vietnam War was about an argument between Aristotle Onassis and Howard Hughes. Now, when that film came out versus now, might cause a chuckle from the audience, might vindicate certain parties that are like, oh, those crazy conspiracy theorists. Was that indeed what actually happened with Vietnam? Not exactly, but there is some truth to that. There is some truth to that. And I've recently been reading stuff about Aristotle Onassis even I hadn't come across until the last 2 to 3 years, where I'm like, holy shit. Where one of the big ones being that Aristotle Onassis, because of his shipping out of Greece, which made him a lot of his wealth, he was moving narcotics in league with the CIA, who was what? Keeping the government of Greece in place. For those of you who know Charlie Wilson's War and the famous scene in the CIA director's office where the famous now deceased actor says, Papandreou wins that election unless I don't let the junta take him prisoner. So as we watch these events take place, and not to oversimplify, do we have powerful apex elites who need this situation to get resolved? Now, resolved can mean peace, resolved can mean armistice, resolved can mean war. But resolved the way they want. Yes. Item 2, do we have a lot of powerful people that are very concerned about where their money is going, especially because U.S. aid has been shut down? You betcha. Is this worth killing over? I don't even have to answer that question. And to paraphrase Patrick Ryan, what happens when you try and take out a trillionaire? It's global war every time. There are powerful apex elites that have tried to deliver a death blow to Russia before. And I'm a living byproduct of that in 1917 when my relatives had to flee the country. Yep. And they took out half the aristocracy. They killed the emperor. But damn it all to hell, we still survive. And it's the same thing with Scotland. As long as the Treaty of Arbroath in Scotland, as long as 200 of us survive, there'll still be a Scotland. I've been in meetings, folks, with cybersecurity people, and I am not a cyber person. I know enough to know when I've got to go ask a cyber person I trust, explain this piece of this discussion to me. Russia has cyber assets that are unbelievable.
Yep.
And so does the United States.
Best coders in the world, by the way.
But at the same time, if those types of resources start coming out of the hangar, then I'm terribly sorry. Concerns about oil tankers sinking will be the least of your damn concerns. Because now, show them what they've won, wink. Now you're behind door number 3, and I'm presenting you major medical centers worldwide that lose power for 72 hours, which means what? Well, it means at least half of the vaccines and other drugs that must remain refrigerated have now all expired. Critical surgeries have been missed. People are dying. And then everybody's panicky favorite, for those who still haven't listened to the advice of you should probably keep about $1,000 in 20s or $200 or $500, whatever you can swing. But you should always keep some cash, not to go full 1930s depression, but you should keep some cash on hand, folks, just in case. For those folks who have no cash and find out, oh, the banks are closed for the next 2 weeks, how are you going to eat? So all of this saber rattling and similar, and I'm willing to throw some belief behind the idea that Donald Trump is, or let me rephrase, the administration, because it's not just him, the administration is making these statements and rattling these sabers because the last thing they ever want to do is demonstrate that they might be cutting Russia any kind of slack at all, because they're surrounded by the enemy. It's that line I shared on a prior program where I said oh my, that actor, Sulu, George Takei.
George Takei.
Yeah, George Takei, who stunningly appeared in John Wayne's film The Green Berets. And there's a scene where one of the American commanders asks George Takei, who's playing a South Vietnamese colonel, what is the degree of Viet Cong penetration of our fire base? Like, where are their spies? And he looks at the other American commanders and says, I've got VC in my unit. Like, that's how penetrated we are. It's the same thing here. Plus, let's not forget, Russia's GRU, their military intelligence agency, and the FSB, the inheritor of the KGB, those folks aren't sitting in Moscow drinking coffee right now. They got spies everywhere. They got people hacking.
Some of the best. And here's the thing.
Everywhere. So
Also,
it's not like they don't know what the back channel is really saying about this.
Right. And fellas, real quick, they also have all the dirty laundry on many, many, many Western politicians that can also be aired.
Yes. And what was the rumor, folks, I told you in in Miami and other parts of Florida when Jeff Epstein's evidence locker that law enforcement had down there got broken into. Mm-hmm. And the rumor was, people said, it was a crime syndicate, stole all the Epstein evidence. Because, I mean, let's be honest, what's the evidence? What's all the films and stuff that they took of who's doing what with who? But the rumor down there on a beach with a hand held to the lips like a scene out of Goodfellas was somebody telling me, well, yeah, it was a criminal concern. And I go, okay, what's your take on it? And they go, it was the French because the Russians paid them. And I'm like, okay, then that means France and Russia now have all the blackmail from just Epstein alone. Which means, to Patrick Ryan again, which means we have full blackmail inflation. Because now not just the United States and Israel have that blackmail, but now the French have it, the Russians have it. And if the French have it, then that means everybody from Morocco to Japan probably has it because the French have sold it to them.
Right.
And we have to remember, these are intelligence agencies and intelligence agents, and they're also very good at counterintelligence, which means what, Dr. Evil? It means in some of that stuff they've sold, they fabricated films.
Correct.
So you may have somebody who looks like they took part in Epstein activity and actually didn't. Or there's financial transactions. That's how that game is played. And by the end of it, how many times do we say here on Rogue, you won't know the players without a program by the time they're done messing with your head?
Yep.
Because the most confused people on this planet, and it's a unfair statement on my part, the most confused people on this planet are intelligence people and billionaires, because they're being fed bullshit all the time.
All the time. Yes.
And this is why even the Russians would tell you America needs to stop relying on so much electronic intelligence and get back into the habit of having some human intel, or human as they call it, on the ground. So, I mean, that your human assets, your human spies are the people who confirm whether the electronic stuff is real.
Yeah, well, then Vella's the very sensitive and fractured millennials that work for the intelligence agencies wouldn't have anything to do. They won't have any sort of real recourse into real capability to doing any sort of human.
Yeah.
Well, they're too busy, looking at other people's, I don't want to say it, but what they do in their spare time with their computers.
Most of them are updating their Grindr profile.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing that it makes me think of, if the blackmail material has been distributed out everywhere, it's almost kind of like making sure everybody has all the same nuclear weapons. It's kind of one of those, balance the power scenarios, almost sounds like.
But yes, in conclusion on the topic we were discussing about supposed or intended U.S. foreign policy and European foreign policy decisions relative to Ukraine, what is the real situation on the ground in Ukraine? Well, I've got a number of websites that literally produce a map and tell you, here's the situation on Ukraine. And a topic I've raised with us on many a program, folks, Dnieper, the city of Dnieper. The Russians are getting ever increasingly closer to Dnieper. And if they reach Dnieper, then it's a straight boat ride up the waterway, who will no doubt be loaded with mines and God knows what all. But it's like, Kiev, you're now wide open if they take Dnieper. And an interesting data point came up recently, which is, I mentioned on a prior program that the German government made a rather unusual statement a week or two ago, where they said they anticipate, the language, they anticipate when or should conflict arise with Russia, their losses will be 1,000 soldiers a day. Now, when I read that or I heard that, my first thought was, Germany is not Germany of the 1930s or even the 1960s. I mean, I have ethnic Germans who are friends of mine here in the United States who came over to work and are either still here or have gone home. Contrary to what most people might believe, most young German citizens are just trying to stay employed. I mean, they have a very generous employment system in Germany, but the thumb screws are getting tighter and tighter over there as work is being moved out of Germany to say it with me, to lower cost countries, and bringing in foreign labor to replace ethnic Germans. Finding jobs for young Germans is getting harder and harder. But they still have a hell of a lifestyle in most of those countries. Clean streets, nice vehicles to drive, modern conveniences. And you're going to take those young kids and put them on the front lines of a war? I think for the first time in German history, you may have people defecting out of the country to get away from it. But I realized where it was the German government got that figure. And it's from a couple of defense websites I've been reviewing lately, because in most engagements, when there's active fighting taking place, Ukraine is losing between 1,000 to 1,400 people a day.
Yep.
And so how do you...
And mind you, that Ukraine was the best trained military in all of Europe.
In theory. But... yeah, this is classic Sun Tzu, the Chinese technician, military reality, which is, if you don't have the ground troops, then you change tactics. If you have the tactics and or better weapons, you can hold off a larger adversary. The only way I could see that conflict progressing is, as we were discussing earlier, all of the members of NATO manning their various weapon systems inside Ukraine. But at the same time, Russia's countermeasures for guidance and control systems, radar, and similar, they may not be as elegant, they may not be as finite in their ability to control things the way NATO technology is, but it's still damn effective. And if you're trying to go in there and solve a human resources problem with technology, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. You'll get a few more hits in than you might have before, but they're coming, and they're just going to keep pounding you with artillery. I mean, Russia's sitting on 50 years of warehouses of 155 millimeter shells. Yeah, they've certainly used a bunch the last 2 years, but we certainly know NATO's run out of. I mean, that's the other part of this too, is we're going to send missiles, we're going to send technology, and when I say we, I mean NATO, to support Ukraine. Okay, I get it. But you already did that previously. And you did that previously when the conflict started in the form of artillery shells and similar to support Ukraine's military efforts. You gave them, quite frankly, a smattering of tanks and vehicles, which was not done properly. Those crews were not trained properly, whether it's a German Leopard tank or an American M1. That's a highly complicated piece of equipment. And now the Russians are displaying them in Moscow and St. Petersburg, which means, and as I've said on a prior program, not just the metallurgy, not just the armor, not just the ordnance the vehicle uses, but all the software of all the computers on, and all the, like, they got the codes, man. All those pieces of equipment use encrypted communications. Now the Russians have the technology behind the encryption. And how fast, not to be indelicate, I've seen how fast American defense contractors work. And I've made a lot of money trying to get through all of that bureaucracy. The Russians don't take that long. No. So we've sent stuff in there before. It had a very moderate influence. And I know it seems silly or funny that we have all these vehicles that if they do come out of their protective cover, they're all covered in these giant cages and things, or wires and things hanging off the side. Ukraine recently started deploying, it looks like a giant scissors. And I get what they're doing. They're trying to cut the fiber optic lines behind the Russian ordnance that's being delivered on Ukrainian positions. But here's the thing. Why are the Russians and the Ukrainians returning to a technology that, no kidding, was used by the Wehrmacht in 1940 and 41 to use wire-guided missiles to attack British shipping? Because it was more reliable than using a radio signal. Right. And then, of course, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, we got all of this really fancy stuff that did amazing things, and we blew the living hell out of Iraq's military using it. And now you're facing a very patient, very skilled, very seasoned enemy who's like, okay, Dimitri, we go back to fiber optic cable. We're not using signals anymore. So it's a damn meat grinder. And I hate to say this because it's just one level of brutality versus another. But even the people I don't like or dare even say hate that are involved in this conflict have got to, they can't be that stupid. Always bet on stupidity. They can't not realize that it's like, okay, you're buying yourselves time. Fine. But to paraphrase Tom Luongo, how much longer can you delay where this game is going? You've got to figure out an economic solution, or whether it's Douglas McGregor or certain other, or Lieutenant Colonel Murray, or certain military-minded people who speak very bluntly, or a European Union, you're just going to have to basically decide whose bitch you're going to be. Yep. You either belong to Davos, you belong to London, or you belong to the U.S. Yep. But that's it. You're not an independent entity anymore. You've been worn down. It's the documentary out of Germany called Master of the Universe, where the German high-end finance guy from their central bank looked at the camera and says, they're going to take out Europe, and if you're going to take out Europe, you have to take out Germany. And before you take out Germany, you've got to take out France. Yeah. And when that documentary came out is when France was burning to the ground, and Notre Dame was on fire, and the rest of it. And we can see just on a live cam the current state in Paris, much less the rest of the country. So whoever, wherever, why ever, I leave that to people to conduct deeper research. But the net of it is the European Union is no longer a viable elite player in this game anymore. They've been removed from the board. Now, some of you might say, "Well, Velas, where's the global war then?" By taking them out, it's Ukraine. That's it. That's the global war that took out the European Union. That was the final stage of taking out the EU. And of course, as Tom Luongo would point out, and London is happy because, if you combine both Russian and Ukrainian losses, we've got probably around 2 million dead Slavic people, which the British never have a problem with. I'll shut up now.
Very well said. And that brings us to the end of the program. I want to thank all you guys for listening in. We'll be back Monday. Enjoy your weekends, everybody. Take it away, Cowboy.